knowing your worth, knowing your value, understanding your identity, and finding and living out your purpose, right, from those things, it sets you up to be able to endure the hard things in life, but also to be able to lean in and savor the fun things. Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the Big Life Podcast. I'm Jonathan Whiting,
And I'm Dean Pivison.
and we're here to talk about all things related to living a big life.
A life where you're able to handle the tough times and enjoy the good times.
A life where you understand your value, feel free to discover your identity, and are emboldened to live out your purpose.
A life that is honoring to God and to others. We hope our conversations help you on your journey to living a big life.
Welcome back, John.
Thank you, Dean. Always good to be here.
I've been excited about today, reaching our third and final installment of our three-part episode on value, identity, and purpose.
Mhm.
And today we're going to kind of wrap up all of those thoughts with the idea of purpose. I think it's one of the things that people really struggle with, and I think when the rubber meets the road, this is where all of the understanding of our identity and our value, this is where it's lived out in our lives. And so I think today we want to explore that topic of purpose, and hopefully by the end of this episode we can provide some steps for people to begin to understand how to discover their purpose.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about this today, like in terms of like why this is an important topic, and it's one that I think a lot of people struggle with. It's a very important topic to many people, and I think that when, at least my observation has been that when people feel like they don't have a purpose, it very quickly leads to them experiencing symptoms of depression and or anxiety, and kind of a you could even say like a existential dread, right, begins to creep in when people don't feel like they have a purpose, or they don't know what their purpose is.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, he talked a lot about his discovery of the value or the importance of purpose in people's lives, even in situations in which there's tremendous suffering or hardship, that when we can grab onto meaning for our lives and purpose, that it helps us to overcome a lot of those barriers in our well-being. In fact, research has shown that a lack of purpose leads to a lot of difficult mental health disorders.
Mm-hmm.
There's this kind of feeling of aimlessness, and that leads to hopelessness, despair, depression.
Yeah.
But when people do discover, and I say discover because purpose is not something that necessarily that you go out and create for yourself. It's something that you discover. And so there's a work to it. There's a labor to discovering purpose. And so we'll look at maybe some of the ways in which we can do that. But I think it does rest out of what we've discussed previously. We talked about how when we are grounded in our intrinsic value, that there's freedom.
Right.
We talked about how when we're grounded in who we are and we have a solid understanding of who we are and how we operate in the world, then there's freedom. And that freedom allows us to go and discover. And what are we discovering? We're discovering what our purpose is.
Yeah. I think that there's two kind of topics that are related to this, and that is values, so with the S added there, different than your intrinsic value, right? But your values as in what are the things that I value in terms of how I live my life. right?
Like would that be character qualities or character attributes?
Yeah, it could. Yeah. So like typical values might be, uh, somebody might value family. They might value friendship. They might value helping people. They might value beauty. They might value
Mm-hmm.
these kinds of things. Um, so I think that has a place in the conversation of purpose, and we can unpack that a little bit. But the other thing that I think often enters the conversation and can be a little bit confusing is goals. And so it's very easy for us to conflate or mix up our purpose from our goals, right?
Okay, help me understand that a little better.
Yeah, so goals are uh, things that we would like to be able to accomplish. So I might say that I have a goal of buying a house one day, or I have a goal of retiring at a certain age, or learning a new skill, or something like that. That would be a goal, something that I'm working towards. Whereas a purpose is it's bigger than just a goal. It's kind of an overarching set of principles and actions that I am doing that define how I'm living my life, right? So this is very different than a goal. Once you reach a goal, that goal is now completed and it's behind you. And this is why when people live their life just chasing the next goal, there can be this very strong sense of dissatisfaction or a lack of fulfillment, because goals are by definition either not going to be met or they're going to be met, and then now they're no longer a thing that is sustaining.
So it's like when our goals do not align with our purpose, then they're dissatisfying.
Yes, and if we don't understand what our purpose is, then we run the risk of not setting goals that move us in a direction that feels true to ourselves, true to how we want to be living, right? So it's like, okay, I got the house, or I got the car, or I got the job. Now what? Whereas a purpose is something that you're constantly working towards, something that you are orienting your life around.
Absolutely, yeah. So I may have a goal to, like the one that you mentioned, buying a house. If that is motivated by a desire to then be valuable, right? My value is in buying a house. Maybe I'm told that that's the kind of the hallmark of success for a young family. Buy a house.
Yeah.
And that's my motivation. That's the why behind the goal. And I achieve that goal, then I'm going to be left found wanting.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't really determine value, which we talked about. But if my aim is aligned with my values, in other words, I want to buy a house so that I can provide for a family, so that I can provide a safe place for my wife, my children in the future or now, and I achieve that goal, then there's satisfaction.
Right.
Because that goal was serving a purpose.
Yeah.
Or serving the purpose that I had discovered.
Right.
In wanting to be a good man, a good husband, a good father, and to provide something of stability like a house for my family. So
right.
So what's behind the goal matters. That's what you're saying.
Yes. Maybe here's like a basic way of breaking it down, or a little simple example, right? So if I say that I have a value around family, I value family, right? And I have my daughter, and I set the goal to raise her up well so that she can enter into an adulthood and be a productive member of society, be somebody who's well adjusted, be somebody who's able to enjoy life and live it fully, right? That's a goal. And that can be enough at times, but I would say that the purpose behind it, right? So now I'm getting to something bigger, is that I want to make the world a better place, right? Family, and when people live out family values and are connected to each other, that makes the world a better place. from sort of a biblical standpoint, looking to, am I building the kingdom? My engagement with the goal of raising my daughter up well is serving my purpose of kingdom building, right? And it comes from that value of family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they're related, but there's some distinction here.
Mm-hmm. So it useful to pay attention to our values, what's meaningful to us, and to a larger extent, what's meaningful to society, both our close society, family, friends, and society at large. And that ties in to the idea of contribution, which we talked about in our first episode.
Yeah. As well as identity, I think, right?
Yeah.
Because
so when all of those things align,
mm-hmm.
that's where we find real meaning for our life.
Yeah.
The issue then arises that we struggle to find that kind of alignment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that there are probably several reasons for that. One I kind of already mentioned, which is that I think we often mistake our goals for our purpose. Mm-hmm. And when it's like kind of setting your sights too short when you focus on goals. And if you don't have that greater purpose in mind, your goals can very quickly kind of lead you astray. It's like when you're learning how to drive and you want the car to go straight, you have to learn to look farther down the road than right in front of the car. Otherwise, you're just constantly making these little adjustments, right? Mm-hmm. But if you set your eyes a little further ahead, your body does what it needs to keep the car going straight.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we may notice is how each of us are so uniquely positioned to provide value, a contributive value, and a fulfillment of purpose in our communities. Mm-hmm. But I think one of the things that we're struggling with, especially young people, is that we've really lost that sense of community. Both because of, well, there's a lot of factors that contribute to that. One being sort of our own Western cultural ideal of individualism, mm-hmm. being one of those factors. Isolation really contributes to that.
Yeah.
And maybe there's some other things that also make it difficult for us to have a domain in which to live out a purpose for our lives.
Right.
Because it's most exemplified in a social context.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know that we know how to understand it outside of a social context. You can't be a purpose unto yourself, right? As much as we might want to be. And I think that is part of the confusion, is because it's often, I think in our Western society, at least here in America, I think the message is often that you can be a purpose unto yourself, right? And I just don't think that works. A purpose has to be something that is bigger than you, something that's outside of you, that you are coming into alignment with.
Certainly, and mm-hmm. that's where you find people enjoining themselves to all kinds of causes.
Yeah.
Whatever that cause might be, because they find purpose in that.
Right.
And if they align with the values of that purpose, then there's synchrony between their values and their identity and what they're living out their purpose to be.
Mm. Yeah.
Right. So if one of your values is conservationism, protecting the planet, and you align with a group that has a purpose or a drive to make the world a cleaner, better place, mm-hmm. that gives your life purpose. You step into that.
Yeah.
And understanding your value and your identity allows you the freedom to step into that. Mm-hmm. And then you discover, in a sense, that that fulfills this something in you.
Yeah.
That you're able to now contribute to something larger than just you.
Yeah. I do think that it's one of the things that sets man apart from the rest of the animal kingdom is that if you take the phrase on purpose, I think that's related. So when we have a purpose, we are doing things and we're acting into it. We are doing things on purpose. There's intentionality behind it. If you watch an animal operate in the world, clearly they have some level of thinking, but it's not an on purpose in the way that we humans have the capacity to do.
It's much more instinctual.
Yeah.
And it's a purpose that serves just themselves.
Correct.
For the most part.
Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. But we as human beings, we can do things on purpose for some end. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. It kind of occurs to me that, you know, we were talking about identity and how that feeds into purpose. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the scriptures say that greater love has no man than this, that he lay down his life for another. Mm-hmm. And we've all heard stories of people who have put their own life at hazard or even given their life mm-hmm. for the sake of another. Mm-hmm. But that purpose is driven by a recognition of the value, the intrinsic value of the other, mm-hmm. and a willingness to give your life for that other. Mm-hmm. And that brings great meaning to an individual's life. Yeah. Not that I'm suggesting that we all go out there and sacrifice our lives, unless you're called, unless you need to, and you're called to do that. Mm-hmm. But that would be sort of the hallmark of this idea of giving of yourself to something greater than yourself. Yeah, I think maybe you just hit the defining feature of it. Because if I think about goals, even if I have goals that are for the benefit of others, the goal is still mine. Goals are ultimately self-serving in some sense. Whereas a purpose is something that is always other-directed. Right? So you have to have that social context to be able to understand it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. Purpose is other-directed. Mm-hmm. Now, goals can be other-directed too. Mm-hmm. And in as much as they serve a purpose. Right. That is greater than just us. Right. But you see what you said there. They serve a purpose. Yes. Yeah. So goals are subservient to purpose. If they're congruently aligned. Yeah. Yes. If they're operating in their best possible way, then they are subservient to a purpose. Which isn't to say that a person should never have individual self-serving goals. Yeah, sure. But even goals such as I want to be healthy, mm-hmm. or, you know, I want to create wealth, or I want this or that, like, in as much as they serve others as much as yourself, mm-hmm. the greater congruence they have with aligning with a purpose. Right. Well, because if somebody were to say, that's a great example, if somebody were to say, I want to be healthy, I mean, the question that comes up is, why? What's the motivation? Yeah. And whatever that answer is, mm-hmm. you're starting to get towards a purpose. Yeah. When I've done work with life coaches or consultants, that's the question they always kind of get me to drill down on, is to really explore why. Why are you doing what you're doing? Why am I doing what I do? Because the more powerful or meaningful, let's say, the why is, the more likely I am to endure whatever the cost might be in its pursuit. Mm-hmm. But if the motivation or the why behind it is insufficient, if it doesn't meet that, then I'm not likely to succeed. I'm likely to give up or surrender, try something different.
Or even if you are succeeding, you won't feel satisfied. There won't be that fulfillment, because I've seen people that are, it's like they're hitting every goal that they set,
Mm.
and they're miserable.
Yeah, because the why is misaligned. There's something about purpose that's very powerful. We're created, I believe, with purpose, on purpose, with purpose.
Yeah.
And when we live out that purpose, when we discover what that is and live it out, we are content and we're at peace.
It's really interesting that peace and contentment will exist even when you're going through very difficult times.
Yeah, that goes back to Viktor Frankl
Yeah.
and what he discovered
Mhm.
in the concentration camps.
Yeah, if you have a purpose, you can endure anything until you're no longer here, right? Until you die, you can endure anything if
If
that
your purpose
is
is sufficient. Yeah. Let's look at it this way. Let's imagine that you and I decide to go on a camping trip together. We decide to do it because it sounds fun.
Mhm.
So the day that we plan it all out and we're very excited, we get our camping gear and our food and we pack our backpacks, and the day dawns bright and cheery and blue sky, and off we go with great excitement, looking for fun and adventure. And shortly after we begin, the clouds come in. It gets drizzly and rainy. We press on. But then somewhere along the journey, you slip, you twist your ankle.
Mm.
We decide to keep going. Then it really starts to rain. Everything's muddy, everything's wet. We get to a river, we have to cross it. You fall in. You lose your backpack with all our food in it. It
Apparently,
washes
I gotta
down the
learn
river.
how to be an outdoorsman.
Yeah, you're the one with all the calamity here.
Yeah.
We get bit by insects. We're just miserable. How long are we going to endure the suffering that we're suffering before we say, this is not fun, let's go home?
Only until I would say for myself, and I would postulate that for all people, it would be for as long as the purpose of that journey requires it, right?
Yeah. So if the purpose is just to enjoy it,
now the purpose
is defeated, and we're going to surrender and give up.
Yeah.
There's no point. And it would really be stupid for us to continue suffering for no reason at all.
Right.
But let's say that somebody came to us.
Mm-hmm.
This wouldn't happen in America, but perhaps in a foreign country somewhere. And they said, over the mountain valley is a tribe, and in that tribe, the children have all contracted some viral disease that they're dying. We have the medicine for them, but we can't get it in by helicopter or plane. Would you and John be willing to hike in there and give them this medicine? Now let's say everything as I described happens. It rains, it's miserable, you twist your ankle, we lose all our food, we're not getting any sleep, the bugs and animals come out and bother us. Do we give up? No. We wouldn't dream of it. We wouldn't dream of it, despite all of the suffering that we're enduring. Because the purpose is greater than the suffering.
Yeah. It makes me think of that scene from the Lord of the Rings trilogy, Return of the King, when Frodo and Sam are climbing up Mount Doom. They're almost there, and Frodo's just stricken with exhaustion, right? He's been carrying this ring, this heavy burden, and they both collapse. They're tired, but Sam says to him, well, I might not be able to carry the ring, but I can sure carry you. He picks him up and starts climbing them. I mean, it's like one of those riveting scenes in cinema. But that's kind of it's the same kind of thing, right? He had a purpose.
And the purpose was worth every cost.
Yeah.
That's how vital that was in that scene.
Yeah.
Right. Now, having said all of that, we're not all going to find that level of purpose for our lives. And I think that's where we get stuck. Because sometimes we think that purpose has to be this grand and this big and this massive thing. Right? And in as much as we're aligned with Scripture, there is a massive thing.
Right.
That from which our lives derive purpose. And that's in service to the glory of God.
Mm-hmm.
But aside from that, not all of us are going to be called on to hike medicine over the mountain or, accomplish something of, what might be import to millions,
mm-hmm.
or carry a ring to a mountain to save the world.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that that we cannot discover purpose for our life.
So this makes me think, because I'm somebody who's always kind of desired some grand purpose, right? Like what we talked about with the hiking the medicine, or what you see in the movies. And there was one night I was having a conversation. I think it was with my dad. It was with my dad, and he just he made the comment that you don't know exactly where your life is going and if you're going to get one of those moments. And a lot of times those moments are actually quite hard, and you might not actually want it.
True.
Right. But the other thing is, you don't know how your actions are going to be impactful to somebody else who might have that moment. Right. And so if you think about, even if you were to look through the Bible, or if you look through history at characters that people that we look to as examples of somebody who had great purpose, there's like thousands of people that came before them. They have generations of their family that came before them that all played a part in getting them to that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's very helpful to, if you look at your life and you say, maybe I'm not one of these people that's going to get that grand moment where purpose becomes very clear. Your purposeful interaction with the people that are in your life is playing a part in this greater story, this greater purpose, right?
Yeah. So it's about discovering purpose
Mm-hmm.
in the everyday, in the day-to-day.
Yeah.
Not the big grand things.
Yeah.
But the moment-to-moment decisions that we make in our life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can be really, you can get pretty granular with it,
Well, you mentioned the idea of being a father.
Mm-hmm.
In the day-to-day, you're serving that purpose.
Right. And I have to ask myself questions about little decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Does going fishing today, it's one of my favorite things to do, but is this going to interfere with my purpose of being a father and raising my daughter?
Mm-hmm.
Right, so I have to make a decision about that.
Yeah, which kind of goes to the hierarchy of values, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, we can find that in the everyday, like you mentioned, being a father, making the decisions based on that value and how you serve a greater purpose than yourself.
Yeah.
Which is your family,
yeah.
Your daughter, your wife. And you make decisions that submit your own desires to the desires and needs of somebody else.
Yeah.
And that serves that purpose. But we can do that in so many ways just in the day-to-day life that we live.
Yeah.
Doing the dishes can serve a purpose
mm-hmm.
and can be purposeful.
Yeah.
And
it's not all toil. Sometimes doing fun things is also serving a purpose, right? So packing the car and taking the family for a picnic, or going to a theme park or something, right? You're engaged in the business of building the family and creating good memories and creating the good, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not all just about work, but there's play as well. But I think the key point there is that you're doing it on purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and out of your values.
It's flowing from your values, and it serves this greater
And
cause.
and that's where when we live out our Christian faith,
Mhm.
then when we see our lives in service to God and to His glory, that's one of the things by which we make those priority decisions.
Mhm.
Does what I'm doing, does it bring glory to God?
Yeah.
There's a verse, I think it's in Ephesians, maybe, or Corinthians, I can't remember. Whatsoever you eat or drink, or whatsoever you do all to the glory of God.
Now that we kind of have talked about what purpose is and maybe how to think about it and how to understand it, the question perhaps becomes, how does one go about discovering it? You know, you mentioned that it's something you have to kind of discover. So what are some ways that we as human beings are able to discover or find our purpose? I mean, we know that it's for the glory of God, but
Yeah, well, first of all, I think we have to be grounded in our identity and to understand ourselves to the extent to which we can acknowledge or at least articulate our values or what's important to us. And then we align ourselves with causes and things and peoples that we serve.
Mhm.
And in doing that, we find something, we'll find something which aligns all of those things for us.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I don't think it can come from any other source than from your relationship with God and from yourself. I say that cautiously because it's not like we shouldn't honor the counsel of others, but sometimes even parents can direct their child towards something that doesn't
Mhm.
meet their values or the things that meet their personality.
Mhm.
For a lot of years, young people were told go to college, go to college, go to college, whether that fulfilled a purpose for them or not.
Mm. I always think about like what are the action steps, right? And I think that we've talked about how when you're living out your values that are in line with your purpose, right? Then that gets you on the right path. But like, how do you live out your values? That's always a question that I think it's like, it sounds very easy, it sounds very simple when you say it, but I think a lot of people struggle to actually do it. So you might say, I'll use myself again as this whole psychology journey, right? It's like at some point in my life, I said, I think I want to be a therapist, right? And that's because I have a value of helping people, right? I want to build God's kingdom in that way, to uplift people, to make them strong, to make them useful to the kingdom, and I can be useful to the kingdom in that way. So that's the purpose. There's my value in that. How do I do that, right? And sometimes it's like, well, okay, you got to go to college and you got to do university and take classes and sign up and so those are action steps. But sometimes it can be helpful to look at what are the really, really small steps. So like I had this one experience in graduate school where I was called up to the front of the class. Well, actually, I volunteered. I went up to the front of the class to do a role play of therapy, and my classmate who was playing the client and I was playing the therapist, she's telling me this story, and she's talked about something funny that had happened that weekend, and she kind of laughed, and I'm sitting there just kind of nodding along, trying to be, you know, a officious therapist, and the professor stopped us right in the middle, and mind you, like all the other classmates are like watching us, so we're like on the spot, and she says, "Why didn't you laugh?" She laughed. Why didn't you laugh with her? Right? And so I had to realize it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks in that moment that I'm not very good at showing that I'm tracking with other people's emotions. I was feeling it, but I didn't. I was just like a blank slate on the outside. And then it hit me that there's actually some emotions that I'm not very good at tracking with because they make me feel uncomfortable. And so I had to go to therapy for that. And so I tell that story just to illustrate that I could take a small step of going and working this thing out within me that served this greater purpose, right, of being a therapist who can help somebody. So it's a small little step.
And I think we have to look at it in the small little steps.
Mhm.
It's like we're going back to the everyday.
Yeah.
Finding purpose in the everyday.
Yeah.
I think the starting point would be we have to understand or at least explore what our values are. What is important to us, right? What are the most important values for us in living out our life?
Yeah, I do think that's the starting point.
And then secondarily to that, where do these values come from, and are they really mine?
Say more about that.
Well, I think sometimes we adopt values that aren't truly ours, either from society, from parents, from peers, from external sources. And it's not that they're not good, it's just they're not ours. And it's not wrong to adopt or to take on the values that are instilled from our parents or from people of value that we admire. But if it's not congruent with who we are, then it's not going to serve. We're not going to be able to utilize it to serve a purpose.
Yeah.
We're always going to be left feeling misaligned.
Yeah. I think a lot of people that live that way also carry the burden of not feeling good enough.
That's one of the consequences. Yeah. So you'll live out this value, but it will be insufficient to you.
Yeah, it's not the only thing that causes that feeling, but it's one of the things that can cause that feeling of I'm just not getting it right.
Yeah.
A very concrete exercise for this is you kind of got to imagine, it's an imaginal exercise, but here's how it goes. This is what I'll sometimes have people do, and I recommend it to everybody. You find somewhere quiet, go sit down, close your eyes, and imagine that you are at your 80th birthday party. All your friends, all your loved ones are there. They've thrown you this party. And the party goes on, everybody's having a good time. And you're sitting in the middle of the room, just kind of listening, kind of surrounded by all of your friends and all your family and all your loved ones. And you begin to hear that they're talking about you. And they're saying true things about your life. What do you want those things to be? Right, that's the question to ask yourself. If I was in that situation and I was surrounded by people that love me and they're saying true things about my life, what does my heart desire that those things would be? What would I be hearing because it was true of me? Right, and if you make that list, now you've got a pretty good idea of what your values are, what it is that wants to flow out of you.
So indulge me with allowing me to do that exercise with you. Okay. So I'm 80 years old. I'm at this party. Everybody's talking about me. I would truly want them to say, and it to be true, that I was generous. I would want them to be saying, and for it to be true, that I was faithful. And I would want them to be saying that I was sacrificial. I think those are the top three.
Okay, so let's take those for a second.
Uh-huh.
So if we started, so generous, faithful, and what was the third one?
Sacrificial.
Sacrificial. Generous, faithful, and sacrificial. So if we start with generous, once you've written that down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or I guess you don't have to write it down, but it's helpful to write it down.
I'm not going to write it down. We're
No.
just gonna talk
But
it
like
through.
if somebody was doing it, what are the different domains of generosity? So you could be generous with your time.
Mm-hmm.
You can be generous with your money. You can be generous with your emotion. All the little things that come up for you,
Mm-hmm.
right? What if I was going to think of generosity in its fullest nature? I want to list all those things down, right? So now you've broken down this kind of abstract value of generosity, and now you have some things that you can start to take actionable steps. So if you say, well, one of the components of generosity is to be giving with my money.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, are you giving your money?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So in a sense, you're saying, well, if those are your values, that's what you want to be true about you, then let's audit.
Yep.
Your life. Let's audit the decisions you're making.
Yep.
Let's audit how you're spending your money. Let's audit how you're spending your time. Let's audit how you're spending your energy.
Right. And it's really important to do this not from a self-incriminating, self-flagellatory, beat yourself up kind of thing. It's like, no, we're going to audit so that we can find the action steps that you can take that are going to make you feel like you're living.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a beat myself up, get down on myself kind of exercise. It's more like, what are the steps on this journey? What are the first steps that I can do to make this journey of my life exciting and full?
And it doesn't have to be the finished product. It's just the start of the journey.
Yeah.
And it's small and it's incremental.
Right.
But it's still essential.
Right.
Yeah.
So generosity is a good one, because a lot of people are going to find themselves, especially if they're younger, they don't have a lot of money to give. Right. So if you've just defined generosity as far as money, you might have a problem. But when you sit down and you actually look at what is generosity and you fill out the list, it's like, well, there was other things on there. So maybe you don't have money, but do you have time?
Mm-hmm.
Can you listen?
Or energy?
Can you go do things, right? You can be giving of yourself. That's really what it is. Generosity is a giving of oneself. And so now you can find these little action steps. Okay, I value generosity. I don't have money to give, but I kind of spend all my time alone. Right? Well, there's people out there that could probably use something from you.
Mm-hmm.
You can go give. So the second one that you said was faithful. So what does that mean? So there could be faithful in terms of faithful to God, faithful to my family, right? Faithful to my values, right? And so you can break that up. Am I being faithful to God? What does that look like? Am I praying? Am I following His commandments? Am I, whatever? You break it up, and so now here's all these little action steps.
And the better you understand, the better you dig into each of those values, the more you'll see how they can be lived out in the day-to-day, the small decisions of your life.
Yeah. And so I get really excited about it, because these small little things, they grow. It's like, it's whatever the inverse of a small snowball rolling down a hill getting bigger. It's rolling down, but it's like in reverse, it's rolling up. So your life starts to take on more and more and more and more in this really positive way, because you have this purpose. It's flowing from your values, right? Or your actions are flowing from your values. And all of a sudden, you're living a life that is purpose-filled, and it is fulfilling, even if it's hard.
But it sounds like what you can't escape in the idea of purpose is that it's has nothing to do with self.
Yeah. Other than your identity, who
Mhm.
you were created to be,
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that you have value, made in the image of God, given intrinsic worth.
Mm-hmm.
That's
But that's foundational
that's
to
the found. Yeah.
to being
But-
able to explore your purpose. But as far as purpose goes, it's what we do in service
For others.
for others.
Yeah.
And we feel the most actuated.
Yeah, there's real energy in it.
Yeah.
Sustaining.
And once we begin to find that, we look for it some more.
Yeah, that's that building.
Well, we try to align other parts of our life up to that same idea.
Yeah.
Right. So you might have discovered this complete alignment between your identity and your values and your purpose, say in your family as a father, and that finding that congruency, right, energizes you. And you say, well, where else in my life could I find this or build this alignment or discover this alignment? Is it vocationally? Is it socially? Is it within a community somewhere? Is it within a hobby, or whatever we might put our action towards? It can be very addicting once we discover that.
Yeah.
And start living that out.
Yeah.
So that's exciting to me. I think that's a beautiful truth to understand and to begin to work on living out in our lives. But what you and I know from our work and from the people that we have the privilege of sitting with is that it's not as it's such a struggle for so many people, especially young people who find themselves stuck, feeling kind of adrift, disconnected, and really in despair because they're just having a hard time finding this. And I just want to talk a little bit about how has this deteriorated in our society? How has it become such a common struggle for so many people? What are some of the things that have contributed to that maybe we need to jettison from our lives as parasites to our ability to really discover and live out purpose?
Yeah. I think there's two that come to my mind right away. Somehow, I don't know if it's I don't know where we get this message from, but it's certainly the case that in America there seems to be this prevailing belief that things ought to be easy. And that when we experience things that are not easy, there's this evaluation of our situation as though something is wrong, something has gone wrong. And I think that kind of despair,
Or I'm doing it wrong.
I'm doing it wrong. I think it causes a lot of self-doubt. Right. So if you have this belief, because some of the action steps that the greater purpose might require of you are a little bit difficult. Like, here's maybe a silly example, but if you say that I have this value of family and you're single, and so in order to have a family, you're going to need to be able to go out and find somebody to date and marry, and you have trouble talking to members of the opposite sex. This is hard, right? And there's no easy way about it. And so what this purpose is going to require of you is that you have to go face that fear, right? And you got to get comfortable talking with people of the opposite sex. But if you have this belief that says things are supposed to be easy, and the fact that they're not easy means that something is wrong, and something's wrong with me, now you don't do any of that, right? You just sit there wallowing in self-doubt and self-pity and beating yourself up, right? So I think that's one reason.
Fear? If you were to put it down to something, it'd be
I it's fear, self-doubt.
Fear, self-doubt, and a resistance to doing hard things.
Mm-hmm. But it's not so much. I think that it's not so much that people have a resistance to do hard things, because if you watch children, they'll go try new things all the time.
Mm.
It's more so it's an evaluation of what the fact that it's hard means.
Which goes back to our former discussion on value.
Yeah.
If failing at the hard thing means
That
I'm not valuable,
mm-hmm.
then I'm not going to do it, and then that becomes a barrier to discovering our purpose.
Yeah.
Okay. It's sort of like your story that you shared in the first episode, and if you haven't watched that, I'd encourage you to go view those first 2 episodes, because they really connect to what we're talking about today, in which you were preparing to sit for the, I don't know what it's called, psychology exam?
Yeah,
the test?
EPPP.
Uh-huh. And you had this real kind of battle with self-doubt. But tell the story. You had to confront then the fear.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
But it was the thing, because you had said just formally in this conversation that you had discovered your purpose was to become a psychologist because of the value of helping people.
Mm-hmm.
There was this barrier to you in this very difficult step.
Yeah.
In discovering or actualizing that purpose.
Yeah. Because it was difficult, and that caused self-doubt, and I had really misplaced what it would mean if I failed.
Right.
So my analysis was off.
And if you had not been able to overcome that through courage,
mm-hmm.
then you would not have discovered the purpose in which you now live.
Right.
Or now participate.
Right. So, that's good. We can go into that story. So, in order to live out the greater purpose, right? So, I had to go through the whole value thing. Like, what is my actual value here? It's not in being a psychologist, but I have a purpose to help people, and this is one of the ways that I can do it. So, and it requires that I take this test and pass it.
Mm.
So now in the day-to-day, once I can understand my worth isn't going to be affected by my performance, and I can understand that my identity is somebody who God created to have this desire to help people, who is empathetic, who really wants to tune into people, right? Now my purpose to use those things in the day-to-day, it's like, okay, I got to carve out some time to sit down and study. Right. So it's kind of miserable studying for that test, and yet I had to do it for several months. But it's like, okay, I had to get really planned out with my day, and sit down and be diligent about studying through it, and doing something that was unpleasant and it was hard. But once I could look at the greater purpose behind it, it's like, of course I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And it was actually fun. Like, I got to a place where I found a rhythm, and I found a way of doing it that I was living out, right? I was building towards that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I was living it out.
So tell me, what would have been required of you had you failed the test?
If I had failed the test, and so you get 2 chances, and if I had failed both,
right.
And psychology was off the table, I would have to do a reassessment, right? And the value of wanting to help people would still be there, and then I would have to look for what are some other avenues that I can bring this skill to bear, right?
What's another way in which I can align these values and live out my identity with purpose? Yeah.
And so that could take on a lot of different...
But you would have had to contend with the failure.
Yeah.
There would have been a pain or a suffering.
I would have had to grieve
it, sure. The loss of that
vision,
that vision. I think that's important to understand that is part of the process. You know, I'm thinking of people who might say, well, everything I do I fail at, or I tried this avenue towards to fulfilling purpose and I failed.
Yeah, so let me maybe try and clarify, because I think maybe some of my earlier statements could have been confusing. My purpose is not to be a psychologist. my value isn't to help people in therapy. My value is to help people.
Mm.
So there's a million different ways to help.
Mm.
There's a million different ways to serve others, to try and bear other people's burdens, to try and ease those. Like, there's therapy is not the only way to do that. It was one way.
Mm.
And it isn't my purpose to be a psychologist. It's my purpose to help people.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So.
But you would have pursued that until it was no longer viable, and then you would have had to reevaluate a different pathway to fulfilling the purpose that you were pursuing.
Yeah.
Or seeking to discover.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, so if I was going to try and imagine out loud here, like, what I might have done, I don't know why, but I've always had this like, I've always kind of joked that in my alternate life I would be a cabinet maker. I don't really know that much about wood, but there's, woodworking, but there's something about creating things with my hands. And if I was to have started to explore that and had to gone down a different path, maybe that would have been it. And I think, just knowing myself, and if I was able to keep track of that vision of helping people, that I would have eventually ended up in a field where where whatever it was that I was building was targeted towards serving some need.
Mm.
Yeah.
So I think one of the requirements then is a level of adaptability or resiliency.
Yeah.
It's not a surrender of your values. It's not a surrender of the seeking of your purpose. It's just an adaptation. And I think as we get older, we sort of realize that. And it is a painful process. When I was young, and idealistic, I envisioned, having a youth treatment center. Yeah. And there was a period in my life for a couple of years where that was seeming like it might occur, and I was pursuing it. And then that failed tremendously. Mm. And there was a period of sort of left me reeling for a moment because that had failed. And so I did have to do this whole realignment and re-examination of my values, which hadn't changed.
Right.
But then through continuing to pursue and discover what my purpose might be, I continued to try other things, put on other things. And for a moment it felt like my entire value had my value had been so diminished that I couldn't participate. Mm-hmm. But that was just a lie. And once I contended with that, wrestled with it, and then jettisoned it as the lie it was, and rested in my intrinsic value, then I had the courage to sort of stick my neck out there again and try a different path.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the trial and error and success and failure that leads somebody towards being able to discover their purpose.
Right.
But it is an essential requirement to be able to fail at things and keep going.
Would you say that so your value didn't change, and overall the purpose didn't really change? You just had to find a new avenue?
I did have to find a new avenue.
Yeah.
But I did have to remember my intrinsic value.
Yeah, and it's that remembering of these true things, that you have intrinsic value, that you have an identity, right? That you have these values in you, and that you have this purpose. Would you say that it's in the knowing or the remembering of those things that creates the resiliency?
Yeah, it's foundational.
Yeah, resiliency isn't something you just like have or don't have. It comes from these things that we're talking about.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Just like you were talking, so the story that you opened up with, right? Traveling through the jungle and bringing medicine to somebody, right? The resiliency is created by the value and the purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Any closing thoughts on what we might how we might sum this up? This trilogy that we've been exploring together: value, identity, and today we talked about purpose.
Yeah, I guess my hope is that as people listen to this, that they're not going to get too rosy a picture of things. It's not like when you understand these things, all your problems in life go away. They certainly don't. But these things, so knowing your worth, knowing your value, understanding your identity, and finding and living out your purpose, right, from those things, it sets you up to be able to endure the hard things in life, but also to be able to lean in and savor the fun things. Hey everyone, we hope you enjoyed that episode of the Big Life Podcast. If you found it to be helpful, we'd love it if you'd hit that like and subscribe. Also, don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you can catch our next episode. We'd love to hear from you as well, so if you've got something to say, drop it in the comments below and we'll try and get back to you.